Welcome to the Healthy Christian Leader. I'm Dwight Habermehl. Come join me in the living room for some honest conversations. I'll be talking to guests about their journey with Christ through the joys, the challenges, and the messiness of leadership. There's always something to learn from someone's story, so let's get started. Well, hello, friends, and welcome to the Healthy Christian Leader. I have a friend here today as a guest that I know you're going to enjoy, and it's Bruce Havill. Bruce Havill is a long-term Haligonian, and he is just a man who brings joy everywhere he goes, and he lights up a party, lights up a room, and but he lights it up with Jesus. Bruce, have just counted it such a privilege to be able to have you here today and have this conversation. Because I think it's been about 25 years that I've known you, because I know you were to the early days of the well.
Yes.
And when we first got started. And you have just been such an encourager of the body of Christ. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, you're a business leader, and but yet you're a kingdom leader. How did that all come together, and how did that work, or how does that work?
What a question. I am and have been a reluctant leader. I discovered about myself some years ago, even though I've been put into places of leadership, whether in church-related things, the East Coast Festival that we did in 2004.
With Franklin Graham?
Yes. The business, I've owned a business and I've managed businesses, that I have been a reluctant leader, and I would rather play second fiddle. Because, as you mentioned, I love to encourage people. And so people that love second fiddle and prefer a little bit to stay out of the limelight and just kind of lift up whoever and put them into that position of leadership. We did a survey of leadership skills at our church some years ago. My wife had the strongest leadership skills in the whole church.
Oh, wow.
And she's a big picture person. Yeah. And of course, that brings a dynamic into our marriage. We've been married over 52 years, and she's amazing. But with such strong leadership skills in my wife and that natural tendency to lead, we have a little bit of pushback here and there, right?
Yeah.
It's a good thing we love each other, and it's a good thing that Jesus is in both of our lives. Yeah. So I've had good experiences in leadership, but always with a good team, Dwight. I've watched you build your business, and just met some of your team members today. And you've got other leaders in here. And I've learned that, it wasn't hard for me to learn, but I learned that people come with all sorts of different gifts and abilities, which I do not possess.
Yes.
And they're a great asset, church leadership or business leadership.
No, you're right, and it's bringing a team together with all the various different gifts required to do something. Yeah. And you make a good catalyst that way, I would say, because you keep encouraging the team. But now tell me, you owned a commercial cleaning company that did offices and kind of like a service master type of thing here in the city. Yeah. And then you often, or very frequently, are part of the encouragement of the body. Like, that's a main thing for you. How did those two go together?
Yeah. Wow.
And then we'll get into the talk for the day.
No, these are fair enough questions. They're good questions. When I got into a business, so I worked for 50 years in the marketplace. I went to St. Mary's University, took a business degree, going through university with ADD was not the not my happiest moment, but I survived school and university mostly by daydreaming and do whatever work I could do, and anyway, ended up with them giving me a degree. I felt anybody could get one if I got one. So went to work in the family business, mobile home business with my father and his brothers, and that was a good experience. I worked there for 9 years. And
Havill Homes.
Yeah, that's right.
Still going today.
Yeah, started in 1954.
Wow.
So 70 years, last October passed. So I ended up getting into my own business and I had it for 37 years. I was not looking forward to, I never thought I would own a business. I didn't have an ambition to own a business, but I found myself in a job situation for 3 years after I left my family. Thought I would try life away from the apron strings,
right,
so to speak, and went to work in the cleaning supply industry. And it was there under very trying circumstances that I found out what my gifts were and what they weren't. And so I found out that I like people. And I found that what I brought to that company was a care for the people, try to make sure they're looked after. And that's just seemed to be in my heart. At that time, I was at Grace Chapel. I was on the elder board there and kind of shepherding things they were recognizing in me, and called me to be an elder with them and help pastor that church. And I kind of took those skills and heart into the workplace. But after 3 years there, I felt it was to leave. And I left in 1980, just about in the heart of a high interest driven recession.
Right. That would have been the 18% interest rates.
That's right. And I had counseled a lot of younger men. I would have been 35. I was 32 when I left. In 1980, I was 32. I left there in 83, but I had counseled a lot of young guys who were dissatisfied with their work. Don't leave your job unless you've got something to go to, because it's going to be hard to get work right now. A lot of companies are failing. And here I ended up leaving because I felt the Lord told me, this is it for you. You're to step away. And I didn't have a job lined up. And I had a wife at home and 2 young children, ages 6 and 4 at the time, in 1983. I stepped away, and without knowing what was coming next, I had 1 month of severance. And 1 month after I left, I owned a company and started my first day of work. I did not have one day with 2 pays, and I did not have one day without pay. So that was a remarkable time, and a time to learn about just trusting God. I didn't know what it was like, what it really meant to trust God on a daily basis until I get into my own business. I know you could add a lot about that, because I've seen you depend very heavily on God when business was difficult.
Yeah,
right?
No question.
Yeah. And he taught me that in the first 6 months. And I was always the guy that if the glass wasn't just half full, the glass was more like 85% full. And I kind of lived that way, and people knew me like that. But starting business July 1st, and then come past Christmas and into the new year of 1984, so 45 years ago, this January that we're just finishing up now, our phone stopped ringing. And the business had started well for 6 months. Our phone stopped ringing. I remember Marilyn calling our business to make sure the phone was still connected. And we were depending on calls coming in and work to come in. And I thought, I'm going to fail at business. I'm going to fail at providing for my wife and children. I'm not going to be able to pay the mortgage on our home. My kids may not have food in front of them. I mean, the thoughts went through my mind, and I became depressed. Only time in my life. that 85% full glass, it just went down to the bottom. And for 2 months I went through that. I didn't feel like me at all, not at all. And it was the scariest time of my life. But the Lord used it to show me I just didn't have to trust Him for my business. I had to trust Him for my marriage, for my fathering. How do I care for my neighbors? How do I contribute to my church? I didn't think I could even be a good friend to anybody anymore, and I love my friends. And He showed me I had to trust Him for everything, including my own mental and emotional well-being.
Wow.
Wow.
So now that must have been, our theme is the joy of the Lord in this conversation. That must have been incredibly forming in that period. How, in your life, would you connect that experience in the development of establishing the joy of the Lord in your life?
Wow. I think that joy is experienced in ways so different from happiness. And, happiness is connected to sweet times with sweet people in sweet places with sweet things, everything's good, laughter, and maybe a success, maybe a business accomplishment. And it's wonderful when those things happen, or you're in those environments. That's great. But happiness is really dependent upon things like that. Now, when you get into a season in life where things are very much the opposite of that, and things are on a huge downturn, and you feel like you're in a black hole and you don't see any light at the end of that tunnel, joy can be present, but only with the presence of the living God, who's making Himself, He's revealing Himself to you. I'm with you. Don't be afraid. Well, fear is a massive thing during depression. Panic attacks, fear, panic attack, worst fears I've ever had. And I felt for a while during that time, as God was teaching me to release all these different areas of my life to Him. At the end of that I finally came to my own mental stability, and that's something I always thought was under control. That could never be challenged. I was just a happy thing. I got along well with people. I like people. I did well in sports. Did enough in school to get through. But there came a time when, these things, when the challenges come along like that, and you're wondering, will I survive? And the last thing that God showed me in that whole process was my mental well-being. And so that whole stability thing was challenged big time. And I had an image one day that my mental well-being was on the bottom end of a very thin thread, like a silk thread going up. And the upper end was held in God's hands. And it just felt like if that thing snapped, I was going to be mad. I would be mad. And I actually came to a point where I thought, well, if I'm mad, I won't be any good to anybody, but I won't be worried about being mad anymore. It was the scariest moment in my life, and God got me through that. And so I came out of that 2-month thing, saw it as an answer to a prayer I had prayed in the December before. Thankfully, I shared it with Marilyn, because she's the one that was able to say, I can see that God is answering the prayer that you asked. And it all started, Dwight, when I became unsatisfied, thanking God for the food on our table and thinking, how am I to be dependent on God for my next meal when there's probably food for 30 days in the house right now? And I thought that wasn't a very good example of living by faith. And so I asked God to help me to trust Him more. Well,
yeah, He did.
He gave the answer. Yeah, He gave the answer. And I've said often in telling the story, if I knew how He was going to answer it, I would have never had the courage to ask.
Well, it's interesting, when I think about it, because, if you don't mind me sharing,
I want you, please.
You've more recently gone through a period with cancer. And yet, when I've watched you go through this, of course, I wouldn't have seen the quiet moments, in the middle of the night. But I watched a person go through with joy and with confidence. What was the difference between this season? Now you would have, you're in your seasoned years of life now.
I'm 76.
And I'm looking forward to having as much vim and vigor in me as you do at 76. But, and that would have been probably in your early 30s back in the day.
Yeah, mid-30s, that's right.
So that experience, which would have, in your mind, in your mid-30s, would have been life-threatening to a degree, yet it wasn't life-threatening. Mm-hmm. And yet later on you come in your mid-70s, 40 years later, and you face it in a whole different way. Why?
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing that you connected to the time back in my mid-30s, because that was the foundation of a new kind of life, a different kind of life in Christ. And, oh wow, he's absolutely faithful and trustworthy, right? He doesn't abandon his children. He actually can't. He's made that commitment to himself, which is fabulous. So yeah, Dwight, it's connected. 14 years ago, I was laying on our hallway floor at 4 o'clock in the morning. Half of my body was paralyzed from my head right down to my feet on my left side. Nothing would move. I called Marilyn. I'd just gone up to go to the washroom, and I thought my arm was asleep. I was getting out of bed, and you know how you raise your arm and get the blood flowing, and right away the feeling comes back, and it wasn't coming back. I'd lift it up, and it'd fall again right down on my chest. And I remember, I got into the washroom. I had to crawl out of the bathroom, and I could only crawl as far as the hallway. And I went on my side. I said, "Hey, Marilyn," and she goes, "Bruce." I didn't want to alarm her. "Hey, Marilyn, yeah. Would you come out to the hall? There's something we need to chat about." And, don't step on my face. So she came out and she said, "What's going on?" She had a nursing background. And I said, "I'm paralyzed from my head down. I feel the numbness moving across my face even now. My words are starting to slur a bit, but I could feel this numbness moving across." She said, "You're having a stroke, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." And she got right down on her knees, put her hands on me, prayed for healing, put 2 aspirin in my mouth, said, "Can you handle those if I put them in your mouth?" Like, she didn't want me choking. I said, "I can." And she called 911. And 45 minutes later, I was on my feet with help and walking around the living room. Went to emerge for 8 hours in an ambulance. They took me in. And God's presence, while she was on the phone and I was laying in the hallway, His presence, the peace I felt, was so beautiful. And I remember talking to Him about my grandchildren. And I said, "Lord, if you're taking me home, you're going to have to look after my grandchildren. I mean, they love me. They're not going to understand, like my wife, my daughters, they'll be sad, of course, but they understand that people die. But my grandchildren, you're going to have to look after them." And anyway, it allowed me to recover from that. And then with the cancer, it was wonderful. I mean, when I came home and told Marilyn that I was diagnosed with cancer, I remember we stood in the hall, we hugged each other, we shed a few tears. I remember her looking up into my eyes and saying, "It is all about trusting God, isn't it?" So it's wonderful that we share that journey together. And God has been so good.
So joy.
Joy.
How does joy get fostered through faith?
Wow. I'm not sure I know the answer. I think being grateful, grateful is what we feel for God's good gifts to us, and thankfulness is what we say to God about those things, right? I have a sense of, I live with a sense of gratitude. Like, things are like, I think things are, I mean, we know there's lots of terrible stuff going on in the world, and I'm aware of a good bit of it. But there's so many good things happening around that God is doing, and in my own life, and in the lives of people that with whom I'm in contact, I see God at work. And then, of course, we're in a country, we're not at war. We have food, most of us. I don't want to be too general in that. I know there are people who are have food insecurity around us. We want to do our best to help there. But I've got so much, and you know, a wonderful wife, wonderful kids, 2 daughters. My 2 sons-in-laws are wonderful men. And so I've got so much to be thankful for, Dwight, and the body of Christ, and having friends like you, and so many in the body of Christ. I just feel very, very blessed. My home church have been so kind, have prayed for me through these different things. Yeah, I just have a lot of reasons for joy.
Mm. And how do you feel that the development of faith, you talked about it the first part of the story when you were in business, and you would have been young, and, you know, in our early days, you know, we see Christ in the scriptures, but we haven't necessarily had that many opportunities to apply faith to everyday life. And I once said to my nephew, I said, faith development is a lot like lifting weights. You know, God will toss you a 5-pound weight, and you start, you might struggle with that. And but then all of a sudden, after a while, you begin to get competent with lifting that 5-pound weight, and then he'll say, well, here, try a 10-pound weight. And life tends to be like that. You handle this amount, and then you tend to handle more, and you begin to see God's faithfulness building and building through the examples, and before long you're benching 300, and how has faith brought the place of being able to experience joy even in the midst of very difficult circumstances, or even what we might call uncertain circumstances?
Yeah. Well, I just think it's a gift, Dwight, that God's Spirit comes in those tough times. We're looking, we're crying out, and He responds. And He does beautiful things in our hearts that are often beyond words. And we just say thank you. One of my trips back to the hospital after cancer, I've had 6 operations for cancer, all in my bladder, prostate bladder area, and 4 of them were done under general. 2 of them were able to be done in the clinic, and so they were removing these tumors from me. After the 3rd operation, they sent me home. I got home and I started bleeding like crazy. And I remember going back in to the hospital, wondering why, Lord, I just got out today, and no sign of any bleeding. And so now I'm losing a lot of blood. I was actually Googling how much blood can a person lose before he loses consciousness. I was wondering, my heart rate going down and so on. So, and then you get an 8-hour wait. You're in emerge. And Marilyn wasn't allowed to go in with me because of COVID. So there were 51 people ahead of me in emerge that night. And I did say to the receptionist, I've been losing a lot of blood. I'm going to sit near you. I don't expect to get any advantage over anybody else. Everybody's got their own issues, I know that. We've got numbers. I've got my number. But I'm going to sit near you. If I look like I've passed out, would you attend to me? And she said, I'll keep an eye on you. So I was seen around 2:30 in the morning. I went through a tough time that night, hard night. The cancer journey wasn't a terrible journey, but there were a few days and nights I wouldn't want to repeat. So I went in, and in the morning a resident finally came in, and I had met him before. He did some work on me and got some things sorted out. He said, Bruce, I got some bad news for you. I said, what's that? He said, we're going to have to send you back over to the Victoria. You're going to be back on the urology ward. You're going to have a surgery. I said, they'll look after me there. That's the best news I've heard for hours. So thank you. I'm happy to go. Well, he was a little surprised. So they took me over there. I went into surgery. They fixed the bleeding. And when I came out of surgery and I was in the recovery room, there were 2 nurses working there. And God gave me words for both of them. And then I knew why I had to go through that. They were really special messages for those 2 women. I remember one of them, I held her hand. I had her hand. I said, give me your hand. She'll put my hand on hers. No, she put her hand in mine. I put a hand on hers, and then she put her other hand on mine. And I spoke to her the message that I got from the Lord. And she just looked down at me and squeezed my hands and shed tears. And I thought, this is why I had to go through this one. And I got down in a room and been through the worst night for me, not relative to many others. And I was laying in my bed, and what does God show me about himself? His kindness, like the last thing I was expecting. And he was showing me how he was so kind. I remember laying in bed and my tears are going down my temples and through my ears. And Marilyn came in. She said, honey, are you okay? Are you okay? You're crying. I said, oh, honey, Marilyn, I'm just so happy. I am so happy. God's just telling me how kind he is. So, I mean, it's a gift. It is a gift. It's just so good.
Bruce Havill, folks. And we're talking about joy. And we're going to connect again in another conversation. So I would invite you to listen in again as we talk about joy. Well, today's conversation was fantastic, but we're not finished yet. We'll be back in the next video with the same guest with more discussion about leader health. You know the drill. Subscribe and hit that bell. Would you join us for the next episode? You can find new episodes every week in video form on the Aaron Ministry YouTube page and in audio form as the Healthy Christian Leader Show wherever you get your podcasts. Aaron Ministries is an interdenominational network of friends in ministry with a mission to foster healthy Christian leaders. Check out our website, aaronministries.com, for more resources and information on how to donate or to start a healthy Christian leader gathering in your area. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.